I would say that federal revenue sharing with states and local communities will relieve the fiscal pressure that is now on cities and states. Most states are in very serious financial condition. The state of Pennsylvania almost had payless paydays the other day. A number of cities throughout the country have just about reached the top of their taxability. Real estate taxes have gone up and up and up, and federal revenue sharing will help to reduce local real estate taxes, will take pressure off of cities and states and permit them to give the services that are needed and necessary without increased local or state taxes.
What is the primary argument against revenue sharing, and is it a valid one?
I think when you weigh the arguments pro and con on the scales, the affirmative arguments are far better, because the responsibility for decision making is placed back in the local community or in the state, where the public has a chance to approve or disapprove of the local officials.
We are cooperating with other countries now. Our first effort is in Latin America to develop other versions of the show, in that instance a Spanish language version of the show that would indeed be authentic to the Latin American countries. We hope that very soon the Latin Americans themselves will take the leadership in developing that show. We hope it'll be produced in Mexico City by Latin Americans in cooperation with Latin American educators. So we are interested in at least providing the impetus toward the creation of other shows in other languages. We were approached during our first year on the air by something like 79 countries around the world to either carry the English language version of the show where the country speaks English, either as a primary or secondary language, or to cooperate with them in the development of a show in their particular language.
It's a little difficult to know whether it will do the entire job, but I personally feel that it will save the passenger trains that are left. Eventually, we would have been without any passenger service.
Will this make any immediate changes in the Santa Fe transportation?
None that I know of, if we keep the Texas chief on, as is indicated, and also the super chief.
Will this make Fort Worth a hustle and bustle city of train transportation as it once was?
No, I doubt if they will add any new trains. We were in doubt as to whether this one would be kept on, and of course we're all delighted because now we will continue to have passenger service as we have had.
Certainly they're being passed by. I find this difficult to understand because by all measures, Dallas is by far the largest producer of passenger traffic, and not only in the state of Texas, but in the whole Southwest.
Do you feel this business about not having good enough passenger terminals available is maybe an excuse?
I can't say. I really wouldn't be able to answer that question.
The rumor, published by a Fort Worth newspaper this morning, is apparently without fact. The paper had told of a coming announcement from General Dynamics. That announcement would allegedly tell of a major plant reorganization and of the layoffs of a large number of employees. Well, a Convair Aerospace spokesman told me today that he knows of no such announcement. He says there's been a reorganization of top personnel and that the corporation now has a new board chairman, but that action took place several months ago. Frank Davis, the manager of the Fort Worth plant, now also directs the San Diego Convair factory, but that's old news. As for the layoffs, the Convair spokesman pointed out that the company has been dismissing between 100 and 300 employees a week following a policy that was announced last year. In March of 1970, there were more than 26,000 people working here. There are now less than 18,000, and by the end of the year, there will only be about 14,000. So, as for the rumors surrounding the GD plant, the spokesman says they're false. But he knocks on wood as he says it. Jay Lewis, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
Actually, what's going on down here by Channel 8. I voted for this bill, but I want to vote for the bill that gets to the root of the evil, and that is the corporate contribution, the influence peddling of any lobby by campaign contributions.
Babe. Go, Baba, babe. Come on, Baba. Unload on
The City of Arlington has asked the District Corps of Engineers here in Fort Worth to explain to them just exactly what areas would be affected by future flooding potentials from Village Creek and from Rush Creek. In an attempt to find out just exactly how much of an effect these creeks have on Arlington, we talked with Roger Hartung of the Corps of Engineers. Roger, just what is affected by these two creeks?
At the present time, the major area that would be affected by flooding along Rush Creek and Village Creek would be an area between Highway 303, Spur 303, and US 80 in the city of Arlington. The area east of Rush Creek has developed in the last few years and does have a flooding potential at this present time.
I believe you have a country club in that area and some very nice homes.
Yes, on the west bank, we have the Shady Valley Country Club. The area here that I've described has some $40,000 to $50,000 homes that might be affected by flooding on Rush Creek.
What are you asking the city of Arlington to do about this? Of Arlington, but of Grand Prairie, Irving, and many other cities across the state of Texas. Something that every city has to confront itself with sooner or later is what to do about the floodplain areas. Art Sinclair, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
It should be noted that the condition with respect to the identity of the donor was the only condition attached to the gift. Moreover, even though the gift was physically received on February 28th and has been in the custody and control of the university continuously since that time. If it appears that the identity of the donor is going to be publicly disclosed if the gift is retained, then the university will have to return the gift to the donor, since the condition under which it was given would be violated by the disclosure. Therefore, under the circumstances just described, I am compelled, both respectfully and most regretfully, to decline to identify publicly the donor, except to say that the donor is a Section 501c3 organization under the Internal Revenue Code, which means that it is a charitable foundation which is under the supervision and which has the approval of the Internal Revenue Service. This eliminates the possibility that the gift came from some undesirable source that could have a negative influence on the university.
I think that's a question. The answer to that would give rise to the difference of this bill so far as the interest of the people in this state as compared to other bills. I think the people were truly interested in this state, and this is really a comment on the effect of the media, of the radio, the television, the newspapers, and this indicates to you what a trip home over the weekend can do for a member of the Senate or the House. I lost 16, 17 votes last week on one amendment that I felt was a crippling amendment, and today we lost only 3 votes on final passage. I think if I had not laid the bill on the table last week as a matter of tactics, that other crippling amendments would have been placed on it.
They calculated the cost in this case of 5 minutes of the training mission was calculated that it was spent in a flyover for the Aquafest. And they charged the 4 102s. Then for the 6 press wives who attended this, they charged coach fare. What would be coach fare on a commercial trip. That's the way they calculated it.
Dear Senator Harris, after carefully evaluating your letter and insinuations, requesting the resignation of General Ross Ayers, I have reached the inevitable conclusion that your approach must be considered another petty, partisan attempt to discredit one of the most effective leaders Texas has ever had to serve in the office of Adjutant General.
I feel that probably some of them will be helped by probably churches or relatives.
What about county
or
welfare?
Friends. County welfare, I think, will probably be able to help a few, but I think from what I can learn from the county welfare officials, that they will not be able to absorb this number at all.
Frankly, the county is up to the saturation point, just about, on picking up the tab for state functions and other functions that we've always tried to help and do our best with the poor, and I think we've done a real good job. But this is a problem that should be solved by the federal government that's brought it about and the state of Texas.
Can they do that, and will they?
I don't know. They should do it.
Basically, the philosophical thrust of revenue sharing is that we say that you do much better when you make a decision as to what you do in Dallas or somewhere than does a bureaucrat whose name you don't know. As to the figures he cites, I couldn't cite their accuracy, but I can only point out that money is divided by states, and the pass-through formula can be going by the process which is enunciated of 52% for the state, 48% for local communities, or if the state feels it's unfair, it can change it within its own structure. And so the state, with working with local community, has full right to do that. I think the criticism is an unwarranted one and is a side angle to get at the bigger problem of opposing a very constructive effort to decentralize government.
If we pass this bill, are you aware of how many hours the people of the state of Texas will have to do business with folks on the East Coast and on the West Coast during normal business hours every
Well,
day?
it reduces the hours that we can deal with the East Coast, but it also increases the hours that we can deal with the West Coast, doesn't it?
Okay, are you aware of what it would do to network scheduling, both for the television industry and the radio and other communications industries in this state?
They came up here and they advised that there would be a nuisance to them, yes.
What about
An
transportation
inconvenience.
schedules?
What about transportation schedules?
Do you think that it would?
Spell it out?
Do you think that it would affect our transportation schedules in any manner?
We've got 24 hours a day, Mr. Coates. It doesn't matter how we spread it out, the trains still get us there at the same time.
You'll find most of our plays are left open-ended like this, so that it does create this thing where they have to think, where they have to become involved in some manner in what is happening. They have to use a thinking process, and this is a part of what we're trying to do too, is open up that communications thing.
I can see that, but I'm sure the audience had two different opinions on whether that man jumped or not.
But this is what helps make the dialogue. If we can get somebody over here saying, no, he didn't jump, someone over there saying, yes, he did jump, then we're going to stimulate a dialogue between those two people, and eventually we hope that, and we have seen the results, other people do get into the discussion.
I am not saying I don't know enough of these bills. I am saying that there are some of us who feel that if we have a whitewash out of this thing, instead of an honest, open investigation, it is going to be further proof of the moral decay of our society, which puts the almighty dollar above everything else in society. If we are going to talk to these young people who are saying to us that we are hypocrites, we are going to have to prove to them that we don't mind laying the facts on the table and facing the issues honestly.
I feel that by his admission of some of the allegations that were made in the Office of Secret Investigation of the United States Air Force report, that we, just General Investigating Committee, must have that report and must have all the affidavits that go with it. Because it's our information that some of the statements made by the OSI was that matters were concerned of state nature and that they would not involve themselves and would leave it up to the state. And this, I think, is one of our avenues to focus attention on.
Look, if you can think of just one meaningful reason why life is worth living, I won't jump. I'll climb back down off this ledge and you can be the heroine that you'd like to be.
Well, there's all kinds of
Just
reasons.
one.
Do you need a job?
No.
Well, how about money?
Money? Barter tokens. Useful only for material acquisitions. One of the most meaningless pursuits with which man digs his own grave. Next.
The sale of new executive aircraft floundered in 1970 compared to the boom year of 1969. Many corporations declined to purchase new aircraft and, as a matter of fact, decided in many cases they didn't need the aircraft they already owned. These companies found that the high-flying limousines just were not popular in the eyes of stockholders when the price of stock and the market was going down. To quote a recent article in the Wall Street Journal, North American Rockwell found only 12 customers last year for its $1.5 million Saberliner, and it was like that throughout the industry. Many companies put their aircraft up for sale, but there was no market for the used craft either. Many of these aircraft went on the block then as use as charters. We talked today to Vice President George Coker of Southwest Airmotive about the local scene and how Lovefield's largest supplier of fuel fared in 1970.
Our fuel dispensing is about 6% off over last year, but it's on the upgrade, and it is my estimate that we will finish this fiscal year with about a 1.5% increase over last year.
Are any of your corporate customers putting their aircraft into mothballs or trying to charter them to other organizations?
No, sir, we have seen no indication of that with the type of corporate customers that we have here.
This type of aircraft is very popular with corporations at the present time. It's a twin-engine turboprop, adequately fast, and yet very easy and economical to operate. These aircraft are not quite as flashy when it comes to showing off in front of the stockholders. This particular craft is owned by Arkansas Best Corporation of Fort Smith, Arkansas. They're a holding company and the major stockholder in Dallas National Bank of Commerce. The president of the company, Mr. H.L. Hembry, told me this morning that they own 3 aircraft, including a recently purchased North American Saberliner, which they picked up on the used market for about $500,000. Companies like Arkansas Best need to rely on their own aircraft because they do not have the accessibility to the scheduled airliner. Well, the corporate aircraft industry may shape up in 1971 as the economy does likewise, but it was not a good year in 1970. From Dallas Lovefield, this is Jim Mitchell, Channel 8 News on the Move.
Well, as you see, we have various streams, including the West Fork of the Trinity River shown here. We're asking the City Council of Arlington to consider adopting a zoning ordinance that would regulate floodplain development and growth along these areas which do not at the present time have a existing potential for flood damages. They're not quite built up at this time.
It's my understanding that the city has pledged themselves to adopt certain ordinances by December 31st of this year. What happens in the event the city does not adopt all of these ordinances controlling the development of this area?
Well, that's quite true that they have agreed, they passed a resolution this past year to adopt some type of regulatory measures in the floodplains, including Johnson Creek and some others, Cottonwood Creek, in the city of Arlington. They passed this resolution and promised to do this in return for receiving flood insurance from the Federal Insurance Administration, a division of HUD. And if they do not pass some type of regulatory measures that are agreeable to the FIA or the Federal Insurance Administration, then there would be no renewal of flood insurance policies in the city of Arlington, quite frankly.